Back in 2020, when the current generation consoles were first coming out, so the Xbox Series X and the PlayStation 5, one of the things I was most excited about for them was that they supported HDMI 2.1. Now, you might be thinking, who cares about that? It's just a cable. Why would that make a big difference? Well, HDMI 2.1 is a standard of HDMI that enables for more bandwidth, more data to go through the cable, and that allows the consoles to do some pretty amazing things. See, both the consoles actually support playing some games, including Call of Duty, at 4K resolution at 120 frames a second, with everything like HDR, all of that fancy stuff, switched on. And that's incredible. But if you were using HDMI 2 cables, they just weren't capable of that. They could only put an image at 4K 60, so 4K resolution and 60 frames a second. So you weren't getting the advantage of having a game running 120 frames a second unless you turned the resolution down. You kind of always had to make compromises. So when those consoles came out, I went out shopping for a TV, bought a TV that supported HDMI 2.1. Everything was great. The console plugs into the TV, everything's running great, 4K 120. But then when I started doing content creation, I actually started that in 2020 as well, then I started using capture cards. So a capture card is a little device that you put between your console and the monitor, the TV, whatever it is, and then that will take the signal, the video and the audio from the console and not only pass it through, so it has a pass-through port that goes out to your display, but it also sends it to a PC so you can record it and stream and all of that sort of stuff. So these capture cards, super useful for content creators, but the big problem was that none of them supported HDMI 2.1. And up until now, no capture card supported HDMI 2.1 as far as I'm aware of. I've been waiting years for something like that. And finally, Elgato have come through and done it, and they have sent me one. So this is the Elgato 4K-X. They've also got something called the Elgato 4K Pro, which is an internal capture card. So as you can see, it's just a little device and you'll be able to plug in your console using HDMI 2.1 into this, and then it has a pass-through, so you can do HDMI 2.1 from this to whatever display you're using. And then it also has a USB-C cable that will send all of that information to your PC. And it will allow you to have a HDMI 2.1 signal completely uninterrupted from your console to your display, so you can make use of all of those fancy things like 4K resolution and 120 frames a second. So let's open it up and see what you get inside the Elgato 4K-X box. Now, the Elgato packaging is always super nice. You can see it's got this little kind of tearable strip along the top. So you can tear that open and then we'll be able to see what you get inside the box. Now, this is the first time that I'm opening this. I haven't had a look inside or anything like that. So this is what you get inside. And if you open it up, got a piece of tissue paper. That's when you know something's quality. And there we go. That is the capture card itself. And you can see it's tiny. It's just a tiny little capture device. It doesn't weigh much at all. It's got the 3 ports on it, so HDMI in, HDMI out, and then the USB-C power one in the middle. And then on the other side of it, it's got a power light, so you kind of know what's going on, because if something's wrong, it will change color to show you that. And then it also has a little input for an audio jack, because frustratingly, the PlayStation 5 still doesn't let you send signal out through the controller jack, so send it to your headphones or whatever, as well as over HDMI so you can record it. So you have to do something a little bit fancy, where Elgato sells something called the Chat Link Pro, where you can plug it into your headphones and your microphone, etc. And you can also plug it into your PlayStation controller, and it sort of goes between the three, and then that means that you can not only listen to stuff in your headphones, but also you'll be able to record the audio as you would want to. I personally don't use this. I have a different way of setting up everything using the Elgato Wave DX and the Wave XLR. I've done a whole nother video on how my audio setup works, but it's quite complicated, just a very different setup to using a Chat Link Pro. But you can get it to work on PlayStation 5. I promise you it can work. I'll link the video in the description below so you can see how to do that. So this is a device, like I said, very, very small, very, very light. Also means it's super portable, which is really nice, because sometimes, when you go to press events and things like that, they might want you to take your own devices to capture stuff. So you could just take a laptop and one of these, wouldn't weigh much in your bag, and then you'll be able to record everything you want at 4K 120 frames a second, which is just absolutely blows my mind. So what else do you get in a box? I'll leave this here for now. And then in the box, you also get the little instruction manual. It's a tiny little instruction manual. You get 2 cables included in the box, and one of them is this USB-C cable. And one thing that I love that Elgato are doing now is if I hold this up to the camera, you'll be able to see it says there, you get its focus, 3.2 and then 10 gigabytes per second, or 10 gigabits per second. Now, what that means is it's a USB 3.2 cable and its bandwidth is 10 gigabits per second. Now, that's super handy to have that actually printed like on the cable itself, because I've got so many USB-C cables and they massively vary in quality and bandwidth. And the way I've had to do it so far is just kind of unplugging stuff, plugging it in, trying different cables until I find something that works for my different devices. This completely takes the guesswork out, so massive props to Elgato for doing that. And then also you have a HDMI cable, and just like the USB cable, you can see there it says on there, I don't know if I can get that to focus, that one's not focusing as well, HDMI 8K. So this is a HDMI cable that is capable of 8K, which is kind of the highest resolution that you could need at the moment. So this is kind of the best HDMI cable that you would need for anything like this right now. And that's it. So there's nothing else in there. And that's because, like all Elgato products, it's incredibly simple. I use a ton of Elgato stuff in my videos and for my content. So I'm talking to you right now on an Elgato Wave DX. The camera I'm using is the Elgato 4K Pro. This is an Elgato mic arm. I've also got 3 Elgato Stream Decks on my table. I've got the Elgato Wave XLR, which is my audio interface. And below the desk, I've got an Elgato foot pedal. This green screen even is actually an Elgato green screen. So I have a bunch of different Elgato products, and they're always super simple to get running, to organize, or to use them how they're intended to be used. Some of them do have software that's, specialized to them. So there is some Camera Hub software, there is Wave XLR software, there is Stream Deck software, but it's all incredibly easy to use. And a lot of products, like the camera, like the microphone, and like this capture card, will work without the software. If you don't want to plug it in, if you don't want to have the extra software running, you can just put it straight into OBS and it will work. So let's have a look at how this thing works in practice. So this is my OBS setup on my main gaming PC where I record all of the footage that you see in my videos. I've plugged in the 4KX using the USB-C cable that Elgato provided. I haven't installed any of the Elgato software or any of that stuff, so this is just going straight into OBS with it. It's worth mentioning that the cable they provide you with is a USB-C to USB-C cable, so if you don't have a spare USB-C input on your PC, you're going to have to work out some adapter that can cope with the 10 gigabit per second bandwidth that cable needs. But once you've got it plugged in, then you can go to sources and add a new source, and then go to video capture device, because that's what it is. And then you can just give it a name, so we'll call it what it is, the 4KX. Press OK. From devices, go to the drop down, Elgato 4KX, and you can see, for whatever reason, it defaults to 1080p because it's only taking up a quarter of this 4K canvas. So then if you go down to resolution and FPS type and change it to custom, then you'll be able to change the resolution to 3840 by 2160, which is 4K, and then the picture will appear there. You've got the nice 4K picture coming straight from the Xbox. FPS, you can leave at match output FPS, but if you want to check that it's actually running at 120, you can do, you can set it to that. It does actually support up to 144 frames per second, so if you're capturing footage from another PC, then you could use that, but the consoles currently can't put out a 144 frames per second signal. But you could put it at 120 if you want, and then obviously you've got the normal other options that you could use for that. So then you can just press OK and you are good to go. Before I get into showing you what the Xbox can do with this capture card plugged into it, I just wanted to talk about trying to record footage at 4K 120. For this video, that's what I wanted to do, and it was quite the learning process because that's quite a demanding thing to do. Recording at 4K resolution and at 120 frames per second means that's a huge amount of data being encoded and stored. So obviously on the hardware side of it, you want to make sure you've got a relatively beefy PC to be able to encode that kind of data, and you want to make sure you've got a fast hard drive that can keep up with the data that's being written to it. I'll show you my OBS settings because I had to tweak these quite a lot. I ended up with lots of video files at first where things were really, really stuttery. It was only recording like 1 frame out of every 5 seconds or something crazy like that. But I've got it working now, and this is how I've done it. So if I go into settings, first of all, on the video tab, I've set the base resolution to 4K, so 3840 by 2160, and also the output resolution to the same thing. Obviously, that's really important that you want to be recording at 4K. You don't want to just have the kind of image in a preview window at 4K and then OBS to be downscaling it or anything like that. So make sure that's at 4K. And then for the FPS, normally when you're on OBS, if you go to common FPS values, it won't even give you the option for 120 frames a second. just because most people don't really want to record at that kind of frame rate. You know, you can't display it on many websites where you'd be uploading content to. There's even not that many devices that will show 120 frames per second content. But OBS is capable of recording it. All you need to do is change this to integer FPS value, and then you can type in 120 there, or whatever frame rate it is that you want to record. Then if you go over to output and then recording, I've got it on the advanced tab. I've got the recording path, like I said, set to a fairly fast hard drive. So I've got an NVMe, I think I've got a Crucial MX500, something like that, but a fairly fast NVMe drive. And then I'm recording an MKV using the NVENC HEVC video encoder, which is the most recent NVIDIA encoder. So I'm using an NVIDIA graphics card to do that. It means that my PC is kind of freed up from other things to be able to just focus on that, because the GPU has special chips, I guess. I'm not technical enough to understand that, but it has special stuff on it that helps you to record. So make sure you're using the NVENC HEVC recorder, and then make sure you've got your audio tracks, etc. set up. You don't want to be rescaling the output because you want to keep it at 4K. And then here are the important bits, the encoder settings. I'm using CQP at 15, so that's a fairly high quality recording. 0 keyframe interval. The preset is on fastest, which is lowest quality. Now, normally I'd be a bit worried about that. In my experience, the footage that it comes up with is still really, really good. It's really clear, maybe to do with the resolution being so high. If you want to change that, if you want to try getting higher quality by moving it to one of the others, feel free. I've got a relatively beefy PC. You know, I'm running this on a 3080, and it seems to be okay at this level. I don't really want to push it any further. But if you've got like a 4090 or something, let me know in the comments how that turns out. Can you push that much further and still get decent quality video from it? Tuning's at high quality, multipass mode at single pass, profiles on main, turned off look ahead and psycho visual tuning, and then the GPU, that's just selected the GPU that I have, and max B frames of 2. So with those settings, I've been able to record at 4K 120 frames per second from the Xbox. Like I said, in the comments, let me know and let other people know who are maybe looking at this. If you find a better way of doing this, if you find a better way to do this with better quality. So far, I haven't had any complaints about the video that I've been able to record with it, but I'm sure there are probably ways to tweak it a little bit just to try and like eke a little bit less compression out of it and get slightly better quality video. So let's have a look at what the Xbox shows us. This is now recording directly off my Xbox Series X using the capture card and using those OBS settings that I just showed you. And if we go into the Xbox settings, we can see what the Xbox thinks is going on. So it's running at a 4K resolution at 120 Hz. I don't think that 120 Hz option even shows up if you're not running a display or running it through a capture card that is capable of it. And then if I go to setup, you can see the Xbox is like, yep, this all supports 4K at 120. It supports HDR10. It doesn't support Dolby Vision, and the 4KX doesn't support Dolby Vision. So if that's part of your setup, you're going to have to use HDR10 instead. It does say there that 50 Hz is turned off. That's to do with my display. That's nothing to do with the capture card. But it's showing that it supports all of that stuff. And then if we go over to video modes, you can see there that 4K is on, HDR10 is on, and then variable refresh rate is turned off right now. You can actually enable it. The capture card does support variable refresh rate. So for anyone who doesn't know what that is, basically it's a way for the display to match the frame rate that's being put out by the console. So if maybe your console's not quite managing to hit a steady 120 frames a second or 60 frames a second, then instead of having some ugly kind of stuttering or screen tearing, then it can be matched up so it still looks really smooth. It works incredibly well. The only reason that I have it turned off is that because obviously if I'm recording something, I want the recording frame rate to be steady. I don't want that to be going up and down. So I have it off when I'm recording. I don't think it would make that much difference either way, but just for my personal preferences, I'd rather make sure that it's always running at the same frame rate. The Elgato 4KX supports variable refresh rate from 40 to 144 Hz, and the consoles support it. The PlayStation 5 supports it from 48 to 120, and the Xbox Series X from 40 to 120. But obviously, if you're running it through a PC, then that 40 to 144 might be useful. Elgato have said they're working on G-Sync with NVIDIA, so it's not going to be there at launch of this, but when they do manage to get that sorted out, which will hopefully be sometime soon, it will also support G-Sync for PCs that are using that. Now, when it comes to HDR, you can see this right now is actually running through the pass-through with HDR. So HDR is being sent to my display. Now, the 4KX is capable of capturing HDR, But if you've got HDR on, you're going to have to turn the resolution down to 1440p to get 60 frames a second, or you can do 4K at 30 frames per second with HDR on. But what it does to kind of make up for it, if you want to be running the pass-through at 4K 120 with HDR on, but you also want to be capturing something, is called tone mapping. So that's when it's turning a HDR image into SDR, so high dynamic range into, I guess, standard dynamic range. Now, the tone mapping is all something that works on the capture card, so it's not going to affect performance or anything like that. Personally, I would say it's not perfect. To get it working at all, I had to go through Elgato support and do a few things. Out of the box, it didn't quite work, but they managed to get it fixed super quickly. Like, it only took a couple of seconds to fix. But I would say with the recordings, like if I pull up the Xbox dashboard, it does make the darker areas of the screen look super dark, and then the brighter areas also sometimes lose a little bit of detail. So you can see kind of on the left of the screen, it maybe doesn't have as much detail as I would like. And that's kind of an impossible thing to get around, that whenever you're doing tone mapping with a high dynamic range image, that's got more sort of variation in the colors and the color depth that just can't be shown on a standard screen. So there's going to be some information lost no matter what you do. And I just don't really like the way the image looks when it's tone mapped. So I would probably prefer to play and record games with HDR turned off completely. So then I'm seeing on my screen kind of the same thing as what's being captured. And now you can see you've just got a much more kind of natural looking image. So this is Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3 running on the Xbox Series X at 4K, 120 frames per second, and I'm capturing at 4K, 120 frames per second. Now, you're actually seeing a 60 frames per second because YouTube doesn't support 120 yet, so I've had to edit it down. And I think there's still probably stuff I could do to make the picture quality slightly better. I've only just started getting used to recording stuff at 4K, 120. It's a little bit of a learning process, like I was showing in my settings part of this video. There's a lot of little things I could tweak, so I think over time I'll be able to make things look even smoother and even better. But right now, the big thing that's kind of amazing for me about this capture card is just the pass-through part of it. Being able to play games at 4K 120, being able to turn everything up on the Xbox, have everything at its best settings on my display, and then be able to play the games while also capturing and recording footage is just incredible to me. Like, that's absolutely huge. Now, while I'm playing, let's talk about a few of the other technical things that these devices can do. They support ALLM, which is this fancy term for something that I'd never heard of before, where basically your consoles will speak to your display and say, hey, we're playing games now, it's time to turn on game mode, which will do things like reduce input latency and stuff like that, depending on your display, depending on your TV. So it does it all automatically for you, so you don't have to change settings manually, which is very cool. They are also going to support ultra-wide monitors. They haven't quite verified all of the kind of resolutions and what they're going to be able to capture and stuff like that, but they are supported. It's something Elgato are doing. And they're also going to support 5.1 surround sound on the 4K Pro. So on that internal version of the capture card, that will support capturing in surround sound, which isn't something that the 4KX can do. It is, however, something that YouTube will accept. You can upload videos with surround sound, which I didn't know. Like, that's very, very cool. So that's something you can do on a 4K Pro. Also, I want to talk a little bit about what the differences are between the 4KX and the 4K Pro. So the 4KX is the one that, I'm using. It's external, so it's something that you just plug in and play. You can take it with you. That's very cool. And you can be playing games at 4K, 120 frames per second with HDR on, and it will capture at 4K, 120 frames per second with HDR off, with SDR on. But if you want to capture at HDR, you can do it at 4K 30 or 1440p, 1440p, 60 frames a second. You can even actually be playing at 1440p at 240 frames a second. It will pass through that signal, which is really good for like PC players who are playing Counter-Strike and other stuff like that. You'll only be able to capture at 144 frames a second. I mean, only. That's still absolutely crazy. But yeah, it will support the pass-through of 240, which is crazy. So those high frame rate things, that's really kind of the focus of the 4KX as far as I'm concerned. The 4K Pro, so the internal capture card that uses your PCI slots, that can only do 4K 60. Again, only. That seems crazy. It can't do the 120 frames per second, but it can pass through an 8K image, which is absolutely crazy. I know there's not many people who can play games at 8K now. Like, not many people have 8K displays, and I think even less people have PCs capable of playing modern games at 8K. But, I mean, as I was uploading this video, as I was recording this, rather, I did see that my friend Jack Frags uploaded a video of him playing 8K on Battlefield 5, so it is definitely something that people are doing, but you know, we're not all jackfrags. But it's nice for future-proofing. If you ever think that you're going to be picking up an 8K monitor, then that's awesome that you'd be able to play without compromising on your resolution while the capture card is still capturing at 4K. The other fancy thing that the 4K Pro can do is that it can capture at 4K 60 frames per second with HDR on. So the external one has to go down to 4K 30 if you want to record with HDR. Again, not something that I'm massively interested in. Like, I don't really like recording stuff with HDR on, but it is something to think about if that's the kind of footage that you want to be recording. So let's go on to my overall conclusions, my overall thoughts about these capture cards. I think it's worth putting a little disclaimer here that when Elgato sent me this, they did send it for me free. This was like kind of a gift, and they were like, hey, we'll send you it. Can you make a video showing it off, etc. They didn't ask me to say anything nice about it. They didn't ask for any editorial control. They're not like, hey, you can't say anything bad about it or anything like that. Literally all they did was give me a load of information about the technical specifications, and they were like, if you have problems with it, come to us first, so then we can try and sort them out, which is what I did with the HDR thing. And they were really quick at supporting me with that. They were really quick at sorting out all of those kind of problems. So I just want to make it clear that they're not paying this. This isn't like a sponsored video, and I don't have to say anything nice about this at all. And I'm putting that disclaimer there because what I want to say about this is very nice. Like, this capture card is exactly what I wanted. It's beyond what I wanted. For years now, I've wanted a HDMI 2.1 pass-through capture card. So I could play games on console, which I do quite a lot. I often ask for keys on console for new games. I like playing console. I like the console experience. It's nice to be able to play those games using the full capabilities of my display and the full capabilities of the console, while also being able to record footage and capture stuff and stream stuff, etc. It's nice not having to think, oh, I'm going to record stuff, so I'm going to have to turn the resolution down, or I'm going to have to turn the frame rate down while I'm capturing it, or I'm going to have to play this game in a slightly worse way because I'm capturing footage. I'm not having to make those compromises anymore with this, and that's absolutely amazing. The fact that it records at 4K and 120 frames per second is an extra nice bonus for me. It's something that I might use more in the future. I think right now I'm likely to use the 4K recording. I'm likely to make some 4K videos. Probably not going to use the 120 frames per second recording right now. Like, that's not as useful to me, and it puts quite a big strain on my PC while I'm trying to record stuff at 120 frames per second. But it's nice that it's an option. It's nice that it's something that I could do, and I'm sure people will be able to do some cool creative stuff with like slow motion and stuff like that, because, you know, if you half the frame rate, you're still getting 60 frames per second, so it'll still look smooth, but the game will be running like, you know, it'll look twice as slow, which would be very cool. So I'm sure there's some really cool creative things that people will be able to do with that, which is really, really nice. And it just seems like a no-brainer for anyone making content on the consoles. Why wouldn't you want this capture card? If you've got a display capable of 4K, capable of high frame rates like 120 frames per second, this is the thing that you want while you're making footage. And like, it's so nice that I can just heartily recommend it with no real disclaimers at all. There's nothing really to say that lets it down at all. You know, I didn't like the way that HDR is handled, but that's not really a problem with the device. That's more just a problem with how HDR works and, you know, the fact that we're going to be mostly recording content in SDR. So, yeah, super impressed with this. If you're wondering whether or not to get the 4K Pro or the 4KX, I'd just say, what matters to you more? Is it doing stuff at 120 frames per second, or is it doing stuff at 8K resolution? You know, that's going to be the big decider for you. If you want to be playing at 8K, you're going to need the 4K Pro, and if you want to be recording and playing stuff at 120 frames per second, then you're probably going to want the 4KX. And, you know, how portable it is also something to consider. I've used internal capture cards in the past because it obviously frees up a USB slot and maybe makes things a little bit easier in terms of PC setup, but it's also nice having an external capture card that you know you can take with you, you know you can plug into like a laptop or something like that, and it will just work. You know, just the plug and play aspect of it is super nice. So both of these devices seem super, super cool. I've only tested out the external capture card, but I'm super impressed with it. If you have any questions about the 4KX or my experiences with it, leave them in the comments below and I'll do my best to answer them. If you've got questions about any of the stuff that I've talked about in this video, let me know, and if I can't answer them, I'll reach out to Elgato and try and get you some answers if I can. Don't forget to like and subscribe, always helps out a bunch. And also let me know in the comments if you like these kind of hardware videos. I don't often do them. I'm just doing it now because I'm just so happy with this capture card. I'm so happy that it finally exists. I decided to do it. But if enough people want more, then maybe we'll try and do some more stuff like this on the channel. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you for the next one. Goodbye.